Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening and welcome to Surrey Police Live. I'm Mampton Oakes and I'll be your host for this evening. Coming up tonight, we're going to be talking about county lines and the role that partner agencies play in helping us tackle it. I'll be speaking to our county lines coordinator, coordination manager, and our partners from Crimestoppers and Fearless, who have joined me here tonight. But first, we're going to go over to our weekly news to see what's been going on in Surrey this week. Thanks very much for that, Alex. So we're up to date with the news for this week now. And let me introduce who I've got around the table tonight. I've got three lovely ladies who are experts in the field of county lines. And I think over to you, ladies. I'll let you introduce yourselves.
I'm Anta, thanks very much. I'm Sarah Crosby. I'm the County Lines Coordination Manager for Surrey Police. I don't have an operational policing background. I come from a partnership background. And my role is about kind of coordinating our sort of response across the force to tackling county lines and also working with external partners.
Hi everyone, my name's Glenys and I'm the Crimestoppers Regional Manager for Surrey and Sussex. I'm here tonight to talk about county lines but also to increase awareness of Crime Stoppers.
Thank you, Glenys.
Brilliant. My name is Emily and I am the Fearless Outreach Worker for Surrey. So Fearless is the youth service of the charity Crimestoppers, which Glenys represents. And what we do is we provide that anonymous reporting service that Crimestoppers provides, but we package it up and deliver it in a manner appropriate for 11 to 18-year-olds. And our other half of what we do is also to provide an education around crime and reporting crime to that age group as well.
That's lovely, Emily. Thank you. Well, firstly, I just want to start with the term county lines because it's a term that we all hear of and we all know it. But can we just clarify so everybody's clear, what does it actually mean? Sarah, can I ask you that?
Yeah, sure. So I think you're right. I think it is a term that is becoming sort of more recognised generally, and in the context of drug dealing. But it's actually got a very kind of specific meaning. So the Home Office definition is around gangs or organised crime groups who are importing drugs into importing areas within the UK. And using dedicated branded mobile phone lines or phone numbers to deal those drugs. And alongside that, quite likely there will be exploitation and violence, so use of violence or threats of violence and coercion in order to control the people who are exploited into that criminality.
So it's a big problem, and it's very much associated with drugs and violence.
Absolutely.
Would you say?
Absolutely, yes. So I think dealing drugs has been around for a long while, but this particular kind of business model, if you like, that element of exploitation and the use of violence and threats of violence in order to kind of control those individuals who are being exploited is a kind of added layer in terms of the impact on individuals and our local communities.
Right. So why are we so worried about county lines, do you think?
I think it's for a number of reasons. I think, as I alluded to just then, it is about the impact on individuals. I mean, obviously you have the issues that are associated with substance misuse, but also for vulnerable adults and exploited children, young people can be targeted and drawn into these activities. It's the impact on those individuals and their families. And then there's also impact, I think, in our local communities. So communities might see increases in violence, increases in serious acquisitive crime. They might see kind of increases in antisocial behaviour. So lots of other crime types, I suppose, and impacts in the local community. And then I think on top of that, obviously, there's an increase in demand on ourselves in responding to that and our partner agencies, because it is a very complex kind of issue, and there will be demands on a wide range of partner organisations. So, from kind of substance misuse services, mental health services, children and adult services, lots of different demands really in terms of the impact. So I think that's why we're kind of so concerned about making sure that we can have as robust a response as possible, really.
Wouldn't you say, Sarah, they're like targeting on the most vulnerable and young people, and that's like, we want to keep our communities safe, and that's why Crimestoppers steps in with asking people to come to us, because 20% of the British public just won't go to the police for whatever reason, but they will come to us. We're an alternative platform for them to report crime. But the most difficult sort of target audience is for young people to report crime, and that's why we have Fearless. And I mean, Emily spoke about it a bit in her intro, but she does county line workshops, don't you?
Indeed. So we've noticed over the past, I've been doing this job for 3.5 years, and we've noticed during that period there's been a definite increase in awareness of county lines and the need for a response to that. And so Fearless, we provide workshops in schools, and we train professionals, and we talk to parents. And previously we were talking to them about reporting crime, we were talking to them about knife crime and drug crime, but we recognised particularly, not particularly in Surrey regionally, but in our part of the charity, that we were also best placed to go and talk to young people about county lines and train professionals about it. So over the past 3.5 years, I think I've seen something like 24,000 young people, and I've trained over 1,800 professionals, and the vast majority, I looked at the stats today actually, and the vast majority of the professionals training sessions and the workshops I do with young people are on county lines. The demand for those is increasing. But it also shows that there's a lot of work that we as partners are doing and the police are doing, that when we look at our stats, Glenys, and the reports we get through, we are seeing a significant increase in the amount who are actually quoting the terms county lines and cuckooing, which I'm sure we'll cover later. That proves two things, essentially. One, that awareness is working. We are getting people to spot the signs and contact us. But the second thing is that, more worryingly, that it may be becoming more evident because the associated activities of county lines are indeed increasing. So it's of increasing importance that we continue to raise awareness of what to look for and how it works.
Absolutely.
And the more reports, sorry, Sarah, I was just going to say, the more reports we get, that's a good thing for Crime Stoppers, because the more reports we get means that people are building trust and confidence in the service we offer, because you're 100% anonymous. We don't care who you are and where you live, but what you know. And for young children, if they haven't got a trusted adult, then we are that platform for them. So, sorry, I shouldn't have butted in then, but...
Not at all.
But,
no, I think that's a really, really important point, is that people do need to know where to go if they've got concerns and how they can report it, and for that reporting pathway to have confidence in that. Absolutely. So I think that's a really important point.
And I think it reassures the public as well that there are different ways of reporting. Yeah. There isn't just one set route that they have to follow, that there are a number of paths. And it's really good that we can have sessions like this and broadcast that out to the local community. I'd just like to bring in you at home here a little bit, actually, because please don't forget, if you've also got any comments to make about the subject that we're talking about. I know it's quite an emotive subject. It may have touched you in your lives or in your local community. So please feel free to message in, and if you've got any comments and questions that we can put to the panel, please feel free and go ahead. We've sort of talked about this a little bit, but again, I just want to stay with the county lines, but what are we doing with our partners to tackle this? Do we have a strategic approach set up? Or?
Yes, I think so. And actually, just before going on to answer that question, I want to pick up on something that Emily mentioned earlier, which was around cuckooing, because I think that's another term that we as professionals use and is probably becoming more recognised. But there will be a lot of people in the general public that perhaps haven't encountered that term before and don't know what that means. And I think in explaining what that means, it also helps to really kind of illustrate how the kind of county lines exploiters actually operate and what kind of level of impact that has on the individuals that are concerned. So cuckooing, it's named after the cuckoo bird who takes over the nest of other birds, and it's essentially a process where exploiters will target, as Glenys has mentioned, vulnerable adults. They may be vulnerable for a variety of different reasons. They could be be drug users, but they might also have sort of be socially isolated or have physical or mental ill health. So a variety of different reasons. They'll identify a vulnerable individual, and essentially it's a kind of a grooming process, I suppose. They will kind of get to know that person, present as a friend to that person, and then they'll ask if they can take over, if they can stay at their house, their flat, or if they can bring some friends round to hang out, or if they can keep a package there, or whatever the kind of pretext is. And then what happens is they'll move in and they'll essentially take over that person's life, and the other people will be invited in. And sometimes they'll move in without asking. Sometimes it will be sort of to a degree kind of an open approach initially, but other times it will be very much by force and threat, really. So they move in and they use that premises for storing drugs, for dealing drugs from, and also potentially to house. So the other thing that county lines will do is they will send children, young people that they might have recruited locally. So typically London, the West Midlands, Merseyside are the kind of main exporting areas for county lines. They'll recruit, potentially a young person, hop on a train with a rucksack of drugs down to a sort of coastal or county town to deliver the sort of the supply. And use those cuckooed premises as what are sometimes referred to as trap houses for that young person to stay in for a period of time, before they kind of maybe go back with the cash that's been generated and give that back to the person that's actually controlling the line, who's kind of distanced themselves from any kind of risk in terms of being detected or coming into contact with potential competitors if there might be some kind of turf war or kind of violence associated with that. So that's essentially what cuckooing is, and you can kind of see once you start to understand what is involved, how that impacts on the individual that's being exploited, that's had their property taken over. And we've had cases in Surrey where people have been denied access to food, had to beg for food, are sleeping on the floor, are too fearful to reach out for help because of the violence they may have experienced previously and so on. So I think it comes back to the question that you asked at the beginning, really, about why we're so concerned about it. So I think the important thing is for people to kind of understand this is not just drug dealing. It's very much about exploitation and violence and threats of violence. So that's why it's so important, and to understand what the signs are to spot, and if they're seeing something in their community that they're kind of doesn't feel quite right, maybe kind of linking that together, and then knowing that there are people like Crimestoppers and Fearless if they need to.
And that's what we really run on the campaigns, isn't it? Because what we do, you did ask about how we partner up. Myself and Emily will run campaigns around county lines, very much with what Sarah's doing, and to let people know, spot the signs, all the things that Sarah said. And we do campaigns with ad vans, going to different locations, talking to the community, engaging with them. And it's not just by ourselves. We have a team of volunteers who help us to engage with people in the public and explain about county lines. And Emily does the same. She goes to, she went to junior citizens. She wouldn't be necessarily talking about county lines to junior citizens, but
aspects of it come in. For example, when you're saying spotting the signs, I'm assuming we'll cover some of those signs in a minute in case you spot them at home. But this event, Glenys mentions junior citizens, so they happen in every borough of Surrey. They get all of the primary school kids over a course of 2 and a bit weeks. They come through essentially a round robin of different providers, different like the police, the fire service, us, loads of people, and they give them safety messages. And my main message is, if you see something that's not right, say something about it, report it. Because if no one says anything, no one can make it better. And something I often ask young people is, what if you see something that you just don't think is quite right, and it's a bit dodgy, and you're like, well, I don't know whether I should say anything or not, and if it's not important, will I get in trouble? And it's a concern for a lot of young people. So I'm like, what happens if you see a dodgy vehicle outside an elderly woman's house down your street? You could walk past it and be like, they're not doing anything illegal, so I'm just not going to do anything. And you notice these cars come and go all the time, or there's more antisocial behaviour, or you can smell drugs from that property, or you're noticing that actually when you walk past on your way to school, you've seen that there's, a needle on the floor, and that's really scary. But you think, well, I don't know what that is, so I'm not going to say anything. And my advice is, if you go to the police, there's 2 things that are going to happen. You give them that, their registration number maybe, and they'll say, oh no, don't worry, that that's just the son of that woman who's visiting. Or they'll say, actually, this is really important information that you've given us, and with that information we can really help keep people safe. And it's those sort of messages, starting from that young age with young children, and then as I work with older children as well, it's going into, what county lines is, how it works, how you can spot the signs of your friends becoming, groomed and exploited by these people who are, these big drug gangs from Birmingham and London coming down into Surrey to try and, take over the drug market, make more money, and they don't care who they use or who they exploit in that process.
And I think what's really good with what Emily does is that they learn the name Fearless. So by the time they get to secondary school and Fearless comes in again, they think, well, I can remember Fearless, and so you build up that trust and confidence, and it is important, and all the things that, but with the campaigns, we do like social media, we have the police do come along to our ad van, and so they will talk to us, and I want to raise awareness about Crimestoppers, but the police are there for people to speak to as well. So it is a really collaboration of together, because it is important for us all to keep our communities safe.
And that's really good, having that partnership approach established and getting this message out to these youngsters so they realise this is not the norm. We've actually got a question come in. Thanks, Michelle, for getting in touch. Michelle, who's watching us on YouTube at the moment, has commented that there's a big drugs issue in Scythewood in Woking with a car turning up every night selling drugs. She's quite concerned that people don't feel safe because of it. And do any of the panellists have any... Do you have any advice for Michelle?
I think to report her concerns either directly to the police or via Crime Stoppers would absolutely be first and foremost what she needs to do. And I think continuing to report is also... And sometimes reporting can seem... it's an altruistic kind of exercise almost, because you're not necessarily going to see any immediate action in response to the report that you provide. Obviously, it depends on what it is. And, if there's a crime in progress, then that's not intelligence. You kind of, if people are in danger, then obviously you report to the police 999. But if we're talking about information and intelligence, we need to take that from a variety of sources and put it together and piece together what's actually going on.
I was just say, I describe this to young people, which would really help as well. It's all of those little bits of information, like seeing that car, knowing that stuff. Each piece of that information is like a jigsaw piece. And every time we pass that jigsaw piece to the police, that helps them put that puzzle together. And it takes them time to put that puzzle together. They have to be careful about how they're going to act, and that's why you might have a delay. But every time you pass the information on, it makes that picture bigger and they can act on it and keep you safer. Every time we hold on to those little pieces, though, the police have all these gaps, and it means that it's even more difficult for them to do something.
Yeah.
Could I just say, could you ask Michelle, I mean, she's come onto Facebook, but the best thing to do, if she feels like she is to report that now to the police. Make sure that if she's got a car registration, that is absolutely fantastic. I know you said about coming through to Crime Stoppers, but we are an anonymous... the information's anonymous service. So, and the fact that she's been bold enough to put it onto Facebook, and that's brilliant. And she's obviously doing the right thing. So thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Michelle. And I hope that's given you some answers there and can help you decide what you would like to do next. Just leading on from that. So if a member of the public is concerned about somebody who may be getting involved in county lines or they are vulnerable, what would you advise?
So I think if you're concerned, I don't know, maybe for your elderly neighbour or your, a neighbour of yours, you see sort of they've suddenly got a whole new set of friends coming and going, or vehicles coming and going at different times of the day and night. Number one is reporting that, as we've said already. But also, I think if you're particularly concerned about them as a vulnerable person, to report that via the multi-agency safeguarding hub. And I think that one of our colleagues can put the contact details for that into the chat. But definitely to because it's kind of a two-track approach, really. So it's on the one hand, it's about kind of putting together the picture, as Emily says, around the perpetrators, the exploiters and what they're doing and tackling the offending. But at the same time, we want to make sure that we're supporting those people that are at risk or who are being victimised as well. And I think you asked a question earlier about what we do with partners, and I think our work with Crimestoppers and Fearless is absolutely fundamental, and it's about that education and awareness raising piece. And I think that collectively sort of increasing our level of knowledge and understanding is one of those kind of protective factors, really, in terms of making our communities more kind of resilient to this kind of activity. But there's obviously a whole host of other things that we also do, not least pursuing offenders, as you would, naturally assume. But I think also we work with partners at the kind of other end of the continuum, if you like, around that wraparound support for victims or vulnerable individuals. And there's a couple of specific ones that I thought it worth mentioning. So we have a cuckoo support service in Surrey that we've had running for a number of years. We were kind of quite ahead of the game, really, I think, in terms of having developed that response, and it's really, really effective in terms of supporting cuckoo victims, and that's delivered by Catalyst, so a third sector voluntary organisation in Surrey, and it's kind of partnership funded. And then we also have a similar service which is coming on stream from April, providing a similar kind of approach and support for victims of child criminal exploitation, so a kind of one-to-one targeted support service to engage with that young person through the arts as a medium, but to kind of build those trusted relationships in order to be able to support them into kind of out of the situation that they have found themselves in. So I think our partnership is huge. That, you know, there are too many to mention.
I'm
really.
sure, yeah.
And, sorry, I just wanted to say, if you could also, if someone wants to report crime but wants to stay anonymous, 0800 555 111, or go online to crimestoppers-org.uk, should know it, and fearless.org as well. If you're a young person, they can go on either, but fearless.org is the one they need.
And we're coming up to the halfway point now. Time goes so quickly when you've got so much to talk about. But we'll actually come and talk a bit more about Crimestoppers
that'd be
and
brilliant. Thank
Fearless
you.
afterwards. So now we'd like to just cut to a video that we'd like to show you that Surrey Police have been showing you some of the recent work that Surrey Police have been doing in and around activities concerning county lines. So we'll play that video for you now. Okay, hope you enjoyed that. And just coming back to the conversation now on county lines, a particular area of interest is a young person. Obviously, it's very much linked with county lines, our youngsters here. And, you know, what are the signs that we should be looking for if a young person is involved in county lines?
I think it's important, again, to kind of understand the process of exploitation and grooming, really, because the signs kind of fall out of that naturally. So rather than kind of committing a list of random kind of sentiments to memory, it's more about understanding that process, I think. So it's a grooming process. It works kind of similarly to the cuckooing process. So the exploiters will target so all young people, by virtue of their age, I think, are vulnerable to a degree, but some young people may have additional risks and vulnerabilities. You know, perhaps if they're excluded from school, we know that can be a particular a risk factor, or if they're on a reduced timetable because they've got kind of less natural structure to their day and less oversight. But so they will target young people and potentially go on a bit of a fishing trip, you know, maybe just hang around outside schools, shouting out a random name and seeing if anybody responds, or if anybody wants to kind of just start engaging in a little bit of banter or whatever. So they're kind of fishing really for potential targets. And then having identified a young person that they think they might be able to exploit, that young person might kind of be looking for some kind of sense of identity or belonging, or they might offer them, the latest trainers. So there'll be different ways of drawing those young people in, and they'll start to build a rapport with that young person and identify with them, build that sense of identity, and then they might ask them to do them a favour, so to perhaps deliver a package or to carry something or to hold something for them. And I think if a young person sort of agrees to that off the bat, they're kind of pretty much trapped there and then, really, because they've kind of shown a propensity or a willingness to participate. However, what they can also do is they might ask them to deliver a package and then set up a kind of fake robbery against their own line. So the young person will be going from A to B. You know, one of the other people involved in the line will potentially at knife point, you know, rob them of the drugs. So there's no loss to the line in kind of terms of assets or finances. But that young person then thinks that they've lost those drugs, and the line will use that then. They'll kind of hold it over them as a drug debt that they've got to work for them to pay that debt off in a kind of a sort of debt bondage, which is effectively a form of modern day slavery. So, you know, then I think it's very, very difficult then, I think, for a young person. And to a degree, you know, they may kind of think, oh, you know, I'm working in return for, I'm going to get paid, you know, whatever they've promised to pay me kind of thing. But I think it's about that, you know, control, and they really don't have the ability to kind of leave that situation. So I think that young people sometimes don't recognise that they are potentially being exploited. Similarly, you know, with adults, I think. So sometimes they don't recognise it. But then when you talk about what are the signs, you think about, have they suddenly got new clothing? You don't know where they've got it from, new, you know, or new trainers, or have they got another phone? So I think the use of the phone in the dealing is kind of pretty key. Have they suddenly become secretive about where they're going or who they're meeting? Have they, you know, had any change in behaviour? Are they suddenly not doing so well at school? Or, you know, there's lots of different changes that you might see in a young person, which in and of themselves might not mean anything, but kind of taken together could indicate that there's something going on.
And what you would say is back to what Emily was saying, that if people notice people standing outside schools and they don't fit in, and like Emily said, that if you see something, don't think it's right, it probably isn't right, then report it. You know, no harm in reporting it. Car registration, what that person looks like and what they're sort of doing that makes you feel uncomfortable. Everyone's got like a sixth sense. We all know when something's not right. So it is important, and that's
you know, these exact messages are what I go and tell young people about, so that they can spot it in themselves, but also spot that, you know, they know their friends really well. They'll be able to notice if, you know, suddenly they get a text message and they have to leave and they don't tell anyone, or, you know, they have got new clothes, and all of those sort of signs. And if you do want to know more about it, give it a quick Google. There's information on Fearless, there's information on the police's website with a larger list of these signs. As you said, we're not regurgitating. But on that note, you know, they will recruit young people, groom young people in a variety of ways. You know, it's almost a last-ditch resort when they wait outside of the school and they try and get people like that. And what I say to the young people is, you know, you might think, oh, I've just said no, I've walked away, which is the best thing to do. But then you need to tell someone, because that person, it could be nothing, right? But it could be the same person that's locking old people in cupboards so that they don't get out during the day and tell them that a county lines gang is abusing them in their house. So, you know, you need to go and tell people about that. And similar in terms of other points that we talk to teachers about, and things that you can notice in your young people that you teach, or parents. And, you know, I did a really poignant session once, and we were talking about the different ways in which young people conceal drugs. And one of the parents, it was online during the pandemic, and they just went into their I think it was their son's room, and turned the camera around and was like, is this something you're talking about? And I was like, that is, I'm afraid. Like, and then we went through how she could get help and support for herself and help and support for her son. But that awareness piece is key.
Absolutely.
I think just talking about it like this and signposting and making the local community aware of what they should be looking for, both with our vulnerable adults and young children, is really important. Just before we watched the short video, I wanted to sort of come on to Crimestoppers and Fearless. We've heard a lot about Crimestoppers, not so much Fearless actually. I don't know how many people actually know what Fearless is about.
It's a brilliant point.
But I would like to start with Crimestoppers firstly, if we can, Glynis.
Yeah.
Can you talk to us about that and what you are?
Sorry, I was getting so excited then to tell you, because Crimestoppers is a charity for a start, and a lot of people don't realise that. We're independent of the police, and we're set up in 1988 where really for people that don't want to go to the police for a numerous amount of reasons, and they feel uncomfortable to go to the police and they want to remain anonymous. And that is our USP. That's our selling point, that you can come to us. We don't want to know where you come from, where you live, just what you know. We won't judge. We just want to know your information, because that piece of information, like Emily said, is a little jigsaw that could help the police in solving a crime. We have over 1,500 calls a day. We have 500,000 calls in a year, and all that information comes to us, and it has resulted in murderers being arrested, hauls of like ammunition, firearms, robberies being stopped. The list is endless. So we are an independent charity. We're not part of the police. The number to ring is 0800 555 111. And if there's one thing I want you to remember, is that number. Also to go online to our website as well is really key, because you can do an online form, you can use the phone. Your number won't be traced on the phone because we've got no 1471 facility. We just won't know your number. And your IP address will be ping-ponged across that's probably not the technical term, but it will be scrambled and no one will know. So we do not know who you are, but you could make a big difference to people's lives by reporting something that you're not sure about. And as I said, 20% of people won't go to the police, and those that do come to us, 80% come to us because they want to remain anonymous. That's the reason for coming to us. And we offer rewards as well for heinous crimes, and that also helps bring in that information that the police might be coming to a wall of silence. And we also have our most wanted website, which is also on the Crimestoppers website. And so and Fearless is a wonderful, wonderful service for young people, and it's our baby. And I'm going to pass over to Emily on that.
Thanks, Glynis.
Brilliant. So essentially, we know from reporting demographics from the police and from mainly from the police, because we're anonymous, so we don't know who contacts us, that young people, although they experience and witness the most amounts of crime, statistically, they are the least likely demographic to actually report it and say something. And so, there's a lot of reasons why young people don't want to come forward. They are scared of the repercussions. I work with young people nearly every day, and the amount of times I hear the word snitch, I'm just like, no, stop using that word. The snitching, anti-snitching is a big thing now, so they don't want their friends to think they're disloyal. They don't want the repercussions, potentially. Maybe they don't know what they've seen as a crime. Maybe they don't trust the police. There are so many reasons which hold young people back. So what we have is basically parcelled up Crimestoppers and our anonymous reporting into an accessible version for 11 to 18-year-olds. So the way in which you could report crime through our service is by going to fearless.org. And on there is an online web form. And it is comprised of 10 very simple questions designed to get every single thing from someone's brain and put it into that form. Because it's really important that when you fill it in, you are giving us as much information as you have. Simply because if you're anonymous and we don't know who you are, how are we going to go back and ask you any more questions? Like, what high street was it on? Or what colour was their hair? And so when you're thinking about filling in, think about location. Think about, don't just put, it happened on the high street. There are over 3,000 streets called High Street in England. So how would we know which one it is? And young people are like, maybe we'll put the town. It's like, well, there are towns with the same name. So how do we narrow that down? One kid the other day was like, well, I'll find the coordinates. I was like, yep, good. You can do that.
Yeah, well, they know from the GPS trackers.
I know.
The biggest piece of advice is finding the postcode. And the easiest way to do that, go on Google Maps, go and click it and copy and paste it in, because we want to make sure that you've been really brave in giving us this information. We want to make sure that we can use it to the best of our ability. And another thing that takes a lot of convincing for young people is like, you're not really anonymous. Like, yes, we are. And they're like, no, I'm sure my brother could hack in and, find it. And I was like, no. And Glennis is right. So predominantly our cybersecurity aspect of our charity is incredibly high. We've been going, as Glenn said, for over 30 years. And in that time, we have never revealed the identity of someone that's given us information. And, we can't. As you press submit on that form, it goes through that high-tech cybersecurity system. It lands on the desk of our contact centre that is open 24/7, 365 days a year. They then look through it and they remove anything that could link it to you. Because sometimes you accidentally reveal stuff like, my neighbour at number 3 is dealing drugs. Well, you've just told us that you live next door, so you're no longer anonymous. We know roughly where you are. And so what we do is we remove that information, we delete it. So when we package it up to the police and we send it to them, it just says, suspected drug dealer at number 3. So there is no way that the police, that us, or the person you're reporting about can ever know that you reported the crime. And that gives so many people just that peace of mind to pass on that information, which I think is a brilliant service.
And on the online form, just going back about that, there is like a two-way. So if someone does put some information in, and also on the phone, they can say that they would come back again, because what happens, the information goes to the police, and just that jigsaw, if there's something missing, the police will go back with a question. But the police will never know who that person is, and that person may never come back. And that might seem frustrating for the police, but it gives that confidence to that person to report anonymously, That's so important. And as for young people, with snitching, what we say now is that that's integrity. You're doing a good thing to your community. You're saving your friends from getting into something that probably isn't something they want to get into. So, Emily does a great job in trying to get young people to feel confident that they can report crime. And what we always say, and what we say in Crime Stoppers, is that we want people to go to the police first, but if they don't want to, then come to us. Whatever you do the right thing. Provide that information.
And I'm sure people at home are getting very, getting reassured with the level of confidentiality that they get from reporting to either of
34 years. 34 years.
Can I just say two things? There are two kind of caveats to our system. The first one is, please don't use us in an emergency. We're not an emergency service, because if you gave us an emergency, we'd have to pick up the phone and ring the police, and we're not going to have as much information as you, and we're not going to be able to do it as quickly. So please, the police in an emergency. The second thing is, we are not a victim service, purely because our main priority is not knowing who you are. So if you come to us with any information about yourself, like, I'm Emily, I'm reporting this crime, we have to remove it. Similarly, if you come to us with, I'm Emily and this happened to me at this place, if we were to tell the police about that, we'd have to tell them who you are because it happened to you, and we can't reveal who you are. So we can't really pass that information on. So if you are a victim of crime, if something has happened to you, please go to the police. That's what they're there for. They're there to support you. But there are also on Fearless's website, on Crimestoppers' website and the police's website, a list of other agencies and charities that can help you in a confidential manner if you are a victim of crime.
Yeah, I think that's really important.
Yeah, I mean, obviously with certain campaigns we do signpost people to places, but as Emily quite rightly said, our whole thing of being is for you to report crime. That's really important. And if in an emergency, yes, 999. But if someone rings up and says, I know so-and-so's got a firearm, well, then that's quite an emergency. So we would flag that up to the police and that would go straight through to them. Right. But, if your life is at threat, then please ring 999.
That's great. And also, what I think people at home would like to know is once that phone call's been made, what is the process? What actually happens to that piece of information?
Well, the information will be collated together, it'll be sanitised, just like what Emily said.
Okay.
Everything's out of it. Daily, it goes off to the police. The police then will access it, process it, decide whether to investigate, whether they will investigate it. And we know no more.
It's up to the police
It's
what
up to
they
the
do.
police. It's not.
And often, young people say to me, "Well, obviously you can lie on the system then, or aren't they going to believe everything that comes in?" And I'm like, well, you can lie to the police as well, and they will know who you are. Obviously, you won't know, but I use the example of you've just reported. Maybe you said, "Oh my God, there's an ape on the high street ripping up bins," and that went through to the police. Do you think the police are going to get in their cars with the sirens on and go straight to the high street? No, they're going to look into it, aren't they? They're going to investigate that information. So they're probably going to ask someone, is there an ape on the high street? And they're like, no. But there could be. And that's exactly what they'll do with all the information that comes through with us. They're not going to take it at face value that that is exactly what is happening. The intelligence department are going to investigate that and see the validity in that piece of information. So if it's obviously someone reporting something fake or something like that, that will be found out. So you can't just report your neighbour because you don't like his music.
And obviously we don't send information like that to the police. But, so don't think about it, people out there.
There's a message for you at home. So how long does this process take? So what happens and how... Well, we've talked about what happens, but how long does it actually take?
From us, it's daily.
Right.
So we have 1,500 calls on average daily. That information will be sanitised and sent through. How long it takes when it gets to the police, as Emily's just said, that is for them to access it, see if it fits in with information that they're looking for. And then, I can't give you an answer to that. I'm sorry. So, but... It goes daily from us.
We have obviously the two ways to receive the information. Mm-hmm. So our call agents will take phone calls and then they will submit the forms and then they will go through. So every time a report comes through, it's also set into prioritised. So if it is an emergency or if it is something of a higher level nature, that will be dealt with first, and then they'll go down the line, as it were. But everything is dealt with within at least half a day and sent through to the police.
Yeah.
We are very conscious that we want people to trust our service and we want the police to use the information that we give them.
And once the information goes, then we have it no more.
Right.
So
there's not recorded.
No.
At your end at
No.
all. Nothing. Okay. So any good luck? Any stories you can tell us, or any success stories?
We can't really tell stories. All we can say is that information has led to a lot of crimes being solved, such as murders. As I said, I've run through robbery, child abuse, domestic abuse. Lots of things have happened because that information has been received. We can only really disclose something if the person says they will be a witness, because our information means no police, no courts, no witness statements. So unless someone says, you know what, I'm going to actually be a witness and I want to talk to the police now, then yes, but then it's no longer our information. So it's only if it's publicised in the sort of we're able to do it, isn't it?
It's the really frustrating part.
Yeah.
I mean, I've talked to a number of the call centre agents and they're like, it's really frustrating because, you listen to all these people and you never know kind of what the outcome was or anything like that. And that's just the nature of what we do because we're not allowed to know who they are. And if we were to report it, tell people what it was, we could reveal someone's identity.
Yeah.
So, it'd be amazing if we could share all of the great things we're doing.
Yeah.
But I know that, for example, last year, 520,000 people contacted us, which is enough to fit in Wembley Stadium over 5 times, fun fact. And out of all of those people, we helped solve 27,000 crimes.
Yeah. Wow.
And they range from local issues all the way up to international murders. And we solved a prison break once as well. It's, any information we take, we don't just send it to the police. Mm-hmm. We can send it to counter-terrorism, to HMRC. We work with a multitude of different partners as well to share that information too, to make sure that what you're giving us, it's really going to make a difference.
Sarah, can I bring you in?
Yeah,
there?
sure.
Sorry,
that's
I
okay. I think from the police perspective, that, information and intelligence is the kind of engine. It's the fuel that drives the engine,
Yes,
really.
very much
And
so.
without that information, we're working with our hands tied behind our back, really. And as Glenys and Emily have sort of very eloquently described how the information that they get is anonymised and sanitised. When that comes in to us and we take it with information from other sources as well, it's the same principle, really. So we aren't necessarily going to act on one piece of information alone. We will look to corroborate that information, and we will look to risk assess it in terms of any action that we take potentially revealing the source of that information. So we have to be kind of very careful in terms of how we use the information that we get from a variety of different sources. And as I say, I think it's about kind of risk assessing what we know about the situation and the level of kind of threat within that situation, and then putting together the kind of tactics that we're going to use to disrupt that activity or to safeguard that individual or whatever it is. So it isn't a kind of necessarily a sort of a very immediate response. And I think that's what I was alluding to earlier when I was saying it's a little bit of an altruistic exercise sometimes, because you're giving information in, you aren't necessarily going to get an immediate response back or ever necessarily know whether the piece of information that you gave was the piece of the missing jigsaw. So it doesn't kind of quite work like that. I think the other thing I would say, I've had some conversations recently with some local councillors, and I think that sometimes people might go to their kind of community leaders or people like stakeholders or whatever to talk about concerns that they have, and sometimes those sort of community leaders might kind of think, well, I'll lodge a complaint or I'll lodge a concern on behalf of my community, kind of thing. But actually, the encouragement really would be for individuals to report, because it's the volume of information as well as the kind of quality of the information.
Yeah.
So, if we have one report of a drug paraphernalia in a park or something, which is on behalf of a community, that might not kind of come across. Whereas if we've got several reports from concerned members of the community about the same drug paraphernalia in the local park, or young people quite naturally hanging out in the local park, but they're being kind of older adults and you're not quite sure what they're doing there with those young people. Right. So it's really about kind of encouraging that individual civic responsibility as much as anything.
Definitely. And for Crimestoppers, we've had, for this year, from April through to February, for Surrey only, we've had 2,000 reports. And it's usually the three top of the pops, and that shows how old I am, is drugs and trafficking and drink driving and drugs and cultivation of drugs. And we had nearly 700 for drugs and trafficking, 300 for drink driving, and 200, I think, for, it might be more than that, for the cultivation and manufacture of drugs. And we're 16% up. So that's brilliant. And the listeners might think, well, that's weird. Why are you going brilliant? You've had reports and it's an increase 16%. But that means that people are trusting our service, giving us that information, and we're building up more information to send to the police. So and we continually improve our online forms, and so that we get the right information to the police. It's important.
I'm very impressed you can remember those facts as well, those statistics. That's excellent. We're drawing to the end of the hour. I'm sure we've got so much more to talk about. I mean, it's a subject that we've got. There's so much different aspects of it that we can talk about. There's so much more about the work of Fearless and Crimestoppers as well. But we're going to have to draw it to a close. But can we, each of you, sum up something that the viewers at home can take away from what we've been talking about today? And if I can start off with you, Sarah, please.
So I'm probably going to steal Emily and Glenys's thunder. But I think if you're worried, report it, and whether that's to us or via the other alternatives. But I think if you have a concern, please report it.
What I would say is, I've missed a big thing out to say. We have a volunteer committee. We need volunteers. And if you want to recruit, please go to our website. Be great to have a number of volunteers in each of the boroughs. And as I keep saying, remember that number, 0800 555 111, or go to our website. It's really important. But please volunteer, come along to our events and help us with our fundraising, because we need the money to run those campaigns. So thank you.
Thank you, Glenys.
Brilliant. The committee is also, they're all really lovely, so I'd recommend it. But my message, similar to Sarah's, and it's how I end all of my workshops with young people, is if you see something that's not right, if you see something suspicious, if you know about crime, please, please, please tell someone, because if no one knows, no one can help make it better. That means going to the police. That is what they're there for. But if you don't want to go to them, or you don't want anyone to know that you reported it, please be fearless, go online, or give us a ring.
Thank you so much. It's such an interesting discussion, and I hope you at home have got something really valuable from that. And if there's one thing here, it's if you suspect something, just report it. And don't forget that Crimestoppers number. There's a short video to watch at the end of the programme, but I think for now, we'll see you next week.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Really good discussion.
Thanks for watching this week's episode. Tune in next Thursday, the 24th of March, to hear our host and guests talk about a career as a police officer at Surrey Police. We'll be sharing what support is available during the application process, what's involved in training, and much more. Please share any questions you have in the comments, and don't forget to tune in from 6 p.m. next week.